Hello and welcome to Revive Your Life podcast. I'm your host, Bianca Grace, licensed therapist and coach. And today I want to talk more about this really important concept called self-development that, again, I think we talk about a lot, but in a lot of different ways that don't really resonate because we're not sure about what we're working with on the inside first. So this is, if you haven't heard my first kind of spiel or ideas around how I came to understand self-development from a vantage point of actually seeing that we don't really have a good grasp on the idea of what our I is, what I want, who I am, without unpacking a lot of stuff that we accumulate, that's imprinted upon us, experience, or identify with along the way. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. A very interesting, I think, vantage point to explain to people how to start to come into relationship with themselves from this self-centered, without being selfish, idea of ourselves, right? So inside out thinking as opposed to outside in thinking. And I proposed this before, but I did not expound on it at all. So that's what I'm going to do today. And most of the time will be spent, because most of the time that we are alive, we are doing something called outside in thinking. We are first and foremost born into the world not really having, and I say not really because there is a temperament deep inside the infant, but not having a grasp of it yet. So we don't even have a sense of being separate or different or being other than our parent. We literally learn about ourselves and how our body functions and feels, about sensations and experiences emotionally through the eyes of the other. Famous psychoanalyst said this, Winnicott, and I always try to help people understand how profound that is. From the moment you lay eyes on another person, that person is now cueing you of when to laugh, when to smile, cueing your body for when to feel and the types of sensations to feel. And then we can move on with this as the child, actually is born with a feeling of anxiety. We can also start to know when to calm down and when to feel upset by the sensations in our body. And it is the parent or our caregiver or people around us that are helping us to start to delineate, right, a difference between our skin and theirs, and feeling safe with theirs. There's a sense of safety. And also knowing, again, through facial expressions and through mannerisms and behavior, the child is constantly peering out onto the caregiver and absorbing what they're taking in. And actually it's imprinting, and it's doing quite a bit epigenetically. There's also neuronal pathways that are being pruned. So if a parent is highly excited, all the time, there are going to be a different pathways than the parent that is lethargic or more depressed. So it makes sense that we are thinking from the outside in, and it makes sense that this is such a difficult part of our journey in self-development because it's imprinted at such a deep level and from the beginning. But then too, there is this other part, and I just want to continue to elaborate on as the child grows. We're talking about now around 2 years old, we are introduced to shame. And so now we know when we want to have a feeling of I want and somebody says no, we'll feel pain, we'll feel shame. We start to also feel different ways because of how people interact with us. So this is again how our mind isn't like, I want something and now somebody is saying no to that. So, and I feel shame. This is the backbone of what I'm talking about. This is the simplest structure to how later when I want something, then I see that I remember that this person said no and caused me shame. So I do that. I back up and say, ooh, I don't want to feel that again. So I back up and I condition, my behavior is conditioned by not wanting to feel a sensation of pain, whether that's emotional or physical. So there is a way right away that the outside is already starting to influence our internal decisions and how we think about what we want. So we need some parameters as being humans. Obviously, there's something about chaos and debauchery and laziness and our animalistic nature. I think that humans are trying to obviously regiment and organize and control to whatever means. I won't go there, but for whatever reason, I think that there is obviously some utility to this. I'm not really explaining a pathology. I'm explaining how it works. So, but even though, as we can see, if the scale starts to tip too much into the negative and that child is never able to, or you're never able to really get what you want to the point where anyone is negotiating with you and it's always a no, well, at some point, this idea of who you are, the sense of self, the temperament, is being what I call either hammered down or layered. It's being buried by experience after experience after experience of rejection, abandon, or pain, or something negative, or fear that is causing this sense of self to have to retreat and take up. We still have plenty of space and to function in life, take up all of the other activities of life, which have completely to do with being out in the world, doing what it is that other people instruct us to do, whether that is school, whether that is, again, an activity that has more to do with, family responsibilities or and such. So it doesn't, or being a sibling or playing with our friends, we can start to have activities within our lives that have a lot to do with others, right? We can take up all of our time in the world. We don't even really need to think about the I want to go play with my friends. I want to go do this or do that activity. But it's generally, again, you can say I want, but there is an other involved. And then there is that dynamic again that continues to influence you in many ways. So kind of taking this a little bit further now into what I want to talk about when it comes to, I think, a part of our mind that is definitely quite active. I know that people, we use all of our mind, but there is this part that we're really able to detect very easily in any sort of therapeutic practice or coaching. Is usually a superego or the inner authority. This part of the brain, when, by the time anyone gets to me or wanting to do this work or to really understand themselves, this part of the brain, the superego or the inner authority, is generally 100% made up of other people interjected or identified with type of experiences. So just like when I talked about that shame experience as a child affecting behavior, it is like that again and again and again. Every single time something negative happens, you're registering it. The authority aspect of this is one of the biggest problems that we face as far as chronic stress is concerned too, where people with authority, if we're humiliating, abusive, if you had bullying in your life, if you had a lot of transgressions by authority figures, and it was very difficult. These human beings will be imprinted upon the brain like we would have seen a bear. We would have seen a bear wanting to attack us or hunt us or eat us, or a wild cat, or whatever predator was out there. So this is the difficult part of this work, is that we've actually, if we take this analogy again or the way of thinking about this and how it's imprinted as how we were in nature, having to survive dangerous creatures, and we would know how that creature smelled, how that creature's footprint looked, what it looked like in the mud or in the sand, what any of its excretions looked like, the types of food it would eat, the way it sounded, every part of it, we would be highly acute to sensing. And we could sense it possibly even without it being there. Well, that's how we're encoding dangerous authority figures in our lives that have been punitive, abusive, humiliating, difficult, and those that have been older than us that still do the same thing. So, but because they don't actually end up killing us, right? They aren't, that's generally not the case. Our brain goes around hyperactively looking for this throughout its life, trying to avoid again, the fearful reaction inside and feeling state that it arouses. And so a lot of us, there's anxiety issues, there's chronic stress, there's cortisol levels, there's trauma responses. And so because this is imprinted, this outside creature of sorts, of a person, is imprinted on the mind as a persistent threat. And that if I hear anybody raise their voice like that person did, or if I see a parallel experience over here, or something reminds me of that back when, our memories are lightning fast to come online and start to affect us. And we start to think again, not from a place of, it causes a massive regression, not from a place of resiliency or a place of knowing that that's a kid talking like that, or that's somebody that's having a bad day, or this is somebody over here that I'm taking this personally. We're not staying objective once these memories are triggered and our emotional reactivity comes into play and we're in fight or flight. A lot of times we are just reactive. And again, it's inside of us on this circumstance, but it is something completely programmed by outside experiences beforehand. So really, really important work to go through when you start to do self-development work, to start to analyze and deconstruct parts of your inner authority, or how you perceive others, or how you judge yourself, or how you stop yourself, or how you again, judge others or judge yourself. We'll just stick with those two. Those two most likely are 100% informed by outside experiences that you have not yet made sense of in the here and now, in an adult body, with an adult mind, with adult competencies and abilities to make sense and rationally think and stay in the driver's seat, or stay in that position of power in your mind and not regress into these reactive places. Very, very stressful. And a lot of emotional issues come from not having an understanding of that part of our mind and how it formed. And we are really just subjected to this at a pretty high level. So the inner authority work is how, again, we are thinking from outside experiences, but those experiences still exist within us. Now, to the next part, two other aspects of this is that obviously society, both in how it's set up, civilization around, you play a role and you're in an institution like a family, or you've entered into a contract like a marriage, and so you're a spouse. And, so we have all of these roles that we can play that actually have standards set to them, values set to them. And this is kind of problematic too, in some ways, because a lot of people don't meet those standards or expectations. And same with jobs, or what a good student is and what a bad student is. And there's just label after label, again, telling us how to act and then judging our performance within that role. And that's another place that we get really caught up in a sense of self that is not controlled by how we feel about ourselves and our own individual path or what our interests are. That is something that can really be confusing for people. And this is usually where young adults kind of have had enough of this at this point and are really ready for individuation processes, but don't know what to individuate. They haven't actually yet obtained an understanding of themselves deep enough to have an identity and be able to start making decisions for themselves. They're still very perplexed in and judging themselves on and their performance in the role, right, that they have been told that they need to play. And then another aspect of this is that along the way, outside influences could have really taken a pretty strong effect on your own, temperament, personality style, the ways that you communicate, the kind of person that you are. If somebody found that to be obnoxious, or I don't like that, or no, that's not how our family acts, or that's what these types of people do. Whoa, that is a great example for how outside influence starts to directly affect inner growth and expression of the self, or even knowing of the self. So when something like that happens, something called arrested development also follows suit. So meaning the development of that aspect of our personality is going to most likely stay very small, nascent, underdeveloped, unless we are on the down low, doing that thing across time without necessarily a lot of support. But usually people have to go and rescue these parts of themselves that have been shut down and start to feed them the knowledge, the information, so that they can gain some knowledge and start to having experiences where they're growing again. And that's the process that we do go through in any of this type of work, where we are finding these places that have been affected from the outside within us, finding interest, finding personality traits, finding ourselves again, in any place that we left behind, and going through a process of healing and nurturing and learning and growing. And having experiences is key to self-development. So I think that about does it for the outside in. We can go on and on, obviously, family, culture. This is what's so, I think, awesome about social psychology, is that we talk a lot about these kinds of subjects. And I would love for that to be more common knowledge, especially in today's world where there is so much pressure from society to feel and think certain ways. And it's been that way for a long time, but we've hit such a polarized level of expression that I consider it regressed, because there's not enough gray complexity, sophistication in our thought, or acceptance for different ways of thinking. But there's always this, what we call this kind of flexing and a regressing. So people go through chaos to get to a new place of organization. So then that could be a process within and of itself when it comes to starting to reverse your thinking from outside in to inside out. So I think that I'll give more of an example for what I would say is, once you start to do this work, like I said, and one of the ways to do this is to really be able to ask why. If I have a problem, whatever that conflict is, whatever comes up where there's some sort of friction within you, asking, why do I feel this way? What does it remind me of? And does this remind me of another way that I felt in the past? Do I see a pattern here? And being okay with a psychodynamic type of analysis of oneself. Really being honest with the fact that wherever you were raised, whoever raised you, whoever you spent most of your time with in childhood and adolescence, is going to be in here somewhere, whether you like it or not. That is a fact. And so if you're not analyzing these things or thinking about them for yourself, they will run you, and they will run you from a place, again, remember when they were imprinted, times when we were nonverbal, mostly from an unconscious place. And it'll be easy to also say when you ask yourself, why am I feeling some way? Well, because they did this to me. Well, I would also like to pose another way of thinking about why do I feel this way? Yes, you can list the situation accurately, like this happened, that happened, but that's really not, it's what is it about what they did that triggered me the most, and why is that so important to me? When has that been violated before in my life? And why am I allowing that now or becoming so upset about it now? So that kind of work. And so I say, once you start to do that, remember what I was saying about the self is buried under all these levels or layers of experience. You're able to kind of start to deconstruct or to draw off one layer at a time. And this part of you, the understanding of, oh, I have been affected by this. I have repressed that in me. I have made this decision because this person did this a long time ago. Or I am continuing to not live in alignment with self-respect because I don't think I'm good enough because this person, I'm aligned with, or I am allowing myself to be with a person who continues to iterate this to me, just like I'm very used to them saying this to me in childhood or at school. So the I starts to understand all these outside influences and becomes stronger and stronger in its understanding or in our understanding of ourselves. So that then translates into every single situation. And I start to say, hey, so how do we think about this from an inside? Now that you have enough understanding of how you think, feel, and behave, and why you think, feel, and behave the way you do, and the I is strong enough to start to really think in the now about situations like, why am I in the job that I'm in, right? That was a huge one during COVID that I was able to help people to really find. They had this moment in time where they could basically, the whole social world fell off and they had this blank slate. They did enough work to get into this position of having a strong enough sense of who they are and why they were in the situations they were in, and made totally different decisions with their lives, completely different decisions. You wouldn't have even guessed that that person was an architect, or that person was an engineer, or that person was married to this person. I mean, it was an amazing time because of that pressure. That outside pressure now fell away, and we were able to do this work to get them to a new place. And that's the key here, is that at some point you start thinking for yourself, about yourself, and prioritizing an experience that you want to have. Like, I want to feel rested. And even if everybody else, this is just like an example, but even if everybody else wants to stay up late, I don't worry that me leaving the situation early is going to affect how they see me, is going to affect how they feel, is going to leave them alone, is going to make me feel lonely, is going to make me feel like I'm missing out. No, I want to feel rested and get a good night's sleep for tomorrow. So I am going to make a decision to part from the outside influences and work into behaviors that are I driven for my best interest and for what it is that I want to do with my life. And once you start doing this, it becomes a pretty easy practice. It starts to make a lot of sense. And you're not bogged down by this constant consideration of everybody else's feelings and all of that. Like I just did it, all that back and forth between, when you start considering other people's feelings, you start to pull yourself into it. You start to change your behavior. Oh my gosh. So it never stops. That's what I'm saying. There's a chronic stress to this, and there is so much more strength for you and your relationships when you can come from an I-centered place and take a deep breath and really be able to see where you are at any given space or any given place in time within a relationship, especially if it's not going well, or in a job, especially if it's not going well, and start to build up experiences where you are doing for yourself what's right. And then you will gain the confidence that you can make these decisions, and you can start to prepare your life for more decisions along those lines. Because this is my last little bit here, is that a lot of people end up coming to this work after they've made many decisions over their lifetime that have been outside influenced and have gotten them into just more and more conflict within themselves. So there is this kind of making decision after decision after decision that cleans all of this out and gives room for your growth. And sometimes there has to be a revamping of your life and a renewing of, either relationships on a new level, meaning that this is where you're growing and going. So if they're not supportive of that, you're going to have to make a decision about that. And that would be for your best interest. And same thing with work, and same thing with any choice that you make in life that requires your time and energy. So I'm going to go into one other topic next week on, again, I think this will be a good third piece to this around goal setting and the words like I want, which is something that I started off with a little bit, but it will weave in, I think, really well some of these types of ways of thinking that I'm trying to teach you through this explanation into how to even create a goal and obtain it over time, which is very challenging for a lot of people. So I'm hoping to make that a little bit easier, but definitely listen to this maybe a couple of times to really let yourself integrate the information, and then even write and use this video as a way of doing some possible self-introspection exercises like journaling and writing about your experience and starting to get to know yourself and the influences that the outside world has had on you over time. They are everywhere and they are here every day. So you are the subject of interest. This has been a wonderful time talking to you. Revive Your Life podcast. If you are interested in working with me, please reach out, BiancaGraceTherapy.com, or my email is BiancaGraceLife@gmail.com, and I will respond promptly. All right. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.